Okay, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning. Yeah, we still have a couple of people checking in.
Good morning.
So how was everybody's Passover?
It was good.
Really good.
That's great. Let's see. Right, last week was the last day of Passover, so this is the first time we're back since Passover. Did everybody get to go to a Seder? Anybody miss a Seder? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So hopefully if you missed it this year, you've had an opportunity to see what a Seder is like. We will hopefully be able to match everybody up with the Seder in the future, starting next year. Hopefully next year everybody's going to have a Seder in their homes and be able to invite real guests around a real table. So usually what we do every year is we put a notice in our bulletins that if somebody has an extra seat or two at the table and they'd like to invite a guest, they're able to do that. And then if you're looking for a Seder, you also let us know, and then we match people up with people who are doing a Seder. And eventually, hopefully, after you see it done a few times, you'll feel confident enough to do your own and invite your own guests over. So I'm working out right now. I'm just going to do a few announcements as we wait for other people to log in here. The last day of class, which is going to be May 16th, which is right before Shavuot. I don't know what I was thinking, but the last day of class is on Shavuot, May 16th, right before Shavuot, May 16th at 9 in the morning. And we're going to have presentations from people who are in different groups in our synagogue. So we have a group called 100 Jewish Men, which is sort of a men's group, obviously. They meet once a month for, well, until the pandemic. They were meeting once a month for dinner and a speaker on a weeknight, usually a Wednesday night or Thursday night. And they've been meeting online virtually once a month this past year and a half. But by the time you all are ready to go, by next year, they'll be meeting again in person. So that's one group to join. You'll meet a bunch of other men in different places, and they do different things, and it's just a way to connect with other people in the congregation. And we have also a sisterhood, which is for women. And again, they've been doing their programs this year online, but next year, hopefully, they'll be doing more in person. And we have our membership person, Mindy Stern, who will talk about membership, and Rabbi Fort is going to talk about, she does programs for young adults and young families. And so she'll talk about her programs. And so that last day, May 16th, we'll have, visiting speakers talk about what they do, and you can ask them questions. The sisterhood speaker couldn't make it on May 16th, so she's going to do it the week before on May 9th. May 9th is the week we're going to talk about the conversion ceremony and the next steps, writing your essays and everything like that. So, and then the night of the 16th is Shavuot, as I said. And we have a special program for Shavuot this year. There's a new documentary about the life of Abraham Joshua Heschel, who I've mentioned a few times in the class. He was a descendant of a great Hasidic family in Europe, but then he also studied in the university. So he had one foot in the sort of scientific, rational, historical school, and one foot in the sort of mystical, spiritual Hasidic world. And his whole life was about this duality of these two different aspects of Judaism. But in the later years, he got very involved in the civil rights movement, became very close with Martin Luther King. And so this is going to be, it's a documentary that's going to show on PBS actually in May, but we got the rights to show it for our Shavuot program. So we'll do that first, and then 4 of us rabbis are going to take different aspects of his life and from his writings talk about what he was like. So that's our Tikkun Leil Shavuot. It won't go all night. It'll just go probably till 11 or 11:30. So that'll be May 16th. Okay, I think everybody's on who's going to be on now. So let me get started. Today's exciting episode is like the one of the required subjects that you're supposed to talk about with people who are thinking about becoming Jewish. Like all the sources say this, and that topic is anti-Semitism, right? You're supposed to let people who are thinking about being Jewish know that there are people out there who hate us, and that's been a long-standing problem for us. And sort of by way of saying, are you sure you really want to convert to Judaism? So, I think most of you probably are already aware of this, and I might have even mentioned it in some ways before, but I'm going to spend one session on that. I do it at this time of the year for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think the most important reason for being Jewish doesn't have anything to do with what other people think about us. The most important reason for being Jewish is what we believe and what we hope, see as our mission in the world. And that's what the rest of the class is about. So I want you to know what that is first before we talk about this other topic. And the other reason I put it off until now is that about this time of year, last week in particular this year, is Yom HaShoah in the Jewish calendar. It's a modern holiday or a modern day of commemoration in the Jewish calendar. Shoah is the Hebrew word for Holocaust. Shoah actually means disaster. And so Yom means day, so Yom HaShoah means day of the disaster. It's a day where we sort of remember World War II and the Holocaust and Hitler's desire to destroy the entire Jewish people all over the world. And although he was also after gay people and he was after gypsies and other groups of people, the people he was most determined to wipe out were the Jews. And he was pretty successful, unfortunately, at that. So I don't like to talk about the Holocaust per se.
Rabbi Morgen?
Yeah.
I just wanted to let people know that they added The Great Dictator onto HBO. So
Oh, really?
If anyone wanted to give that a watch, I watched it recently and it was incredible to
Yes.
the juxtaposition of it. But it's an old movie, but there is sound with it. It was a really cool piece of
Right.
cinematography.
Charlie Chaplin plays Hitler, right?
Yeah, and he plays a Jewish barber at the same time.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah, there's of course a lot of movies now made about it. I think one of the most powerful movies, I think, still is Steven Spielberg's movie Schindler's List. He kind of captures the horror of the entire period, but also is able to narrow in on one particular story about Oskar Schindler, who was a Polish entrepreneur, brilliantly played by what's his name? Escapes me now, but
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson, right? Liam Neeson. And it's a true story. This is a man who, you can tell from the movie. It's pretty accurate. He was a failure as a businessman. Actually, he couldn't make. He was a great impresario. He was a glad hander kind of a guy, but not very good at business. When the Holocaust started, he realized that if he could get free labor, that would enable him to make money. So he made a deal with the Nazis to get Jews to serve as free labor for him, and then he made a fortune. But along the way, he came to see the Jewish people who were working for him as real people. And so toward the end of his life, he made it his mission to rescue as many Jews as he could from the Holocaust. I mean, it was an amazing transformation, and he really did spend every last penny, basically, saving Jews. So he made a fortune, and then he spent it all rescuing Jews, and he died. He was broke after the war. Israel has a special a grove of trees near Yad Vashem, which is the national memorial for the Holocaust in Jerusalem. Yad Vashem means it literally means hand and name, but in this case, Yad means monument. So it's a phrase that's found in the Bible that they wanted to make a memorial and a name for the righteous Gentiles who rescued Jews during the Holocaust. That's what the grove of trees is for. But the main museum is to remember the 6 million Jews who died. So they made a monument and a museum to remember the death of the Jews and the destruction of the Jewish communities all throughout Europe. So that's the sort of International Jewish Memorial Museum. Of course, we have now a United States Holocaust Museum, which is in the Smithsonian Museum District of the Washington, D.C. And we have a local Holocaust Museum Houston, which was funded by local survivors of the Holocaust. It's a really good museum here if you would like to. I used to take a trip there and we'd go through the museum, but you're welcome to do that on your own sometime. And if you're in DC, the Holocaust Museum there is worth seeing. And if you're in Israel, of course, Yad Vashem. But in any case, I was saying that at Yad Vashem, they have this grove of trees called the Righteous Gentiles area. And they plant the tree for all the different non-Jewish people who helped to rescue Jews. And of course, Oskar Schindler is one of those people. He was also buried in Jerusalem. He was buried in a Christian cemetery just outside the old city of Jerusalem. Diane and I once went on a little trip, and we got a map of the cemetery and went plodding through the cemetery until we found his grave. That is featured at the end of the movie, Schindler's List. You see all the people who survived from his list. At the end of the movie, put a little stone on his grave. That's a Jewish tradition to put a stone on a grave marker to sort of as a remembrance that you were there and that you cared about this person. So anyway, that's about the Holocaust. I don't end up talking about the Holocaust per se in this class because there's so much out there about the Holocaust. If you watch a few movies or whatever, you certainly can get an idea of what that was like. What I do talk about is sort of the history of anti-Semitism. So I'm going to share the screen now. If you haven't seen the document that I prepared for the class, it's available on our internet. This is it. As usual, I have an outline and then some attachments. So sadly, for the most part, in the Western world, anti-Semitism really started with Christianity. And I'm going to talk a lot about Christian anti-Semitism today. But of course, the world that we live in today is really, I believe, dramatically different from the world before the Holocaust. Christianity was already, there were some Christian scholars who were already starting to reconsider how they should view Jews and Judaism, really in the 1800s and the early part of the 1900s. But after the Holocaust, there was a lot of soul searching in a lot of the Christian churches about what role their anti-Semitic views might have played. Nazism, of course, was not a Christian movement by any means. But the fact that there was pervasive anti-Semitism throughout Europe at the time may have built a fertile ground for Hitler's claim that the Jews were the source of the evils of Western civilization, and sort of aided him in his project. So after the Holocaust, really, a lot of Christian churches started to re-examine their view of Judaism, and I'm going to start the class talking about that first before I talk about the history. So in 1960, this actually relates to Abraham Joshua Heschel in a way. In 1963, I think the Pope of the Catholic Church, Pope John the 23rd, I believe, convened what was called Vatican Council II, and it was a group of Catholic scholars who were going to reimagine Catholic doctrine. And part of that reimagination was going to be reimagining the Catholic relationship to the Jewish people. And Heschel was actually called to give testimony to this commission. And he's, at least in some significant way, I believe, responsible for the conclusion that they came out with. So at the end of Vatican II, the Catholic Church said three things about Jews and Judaism. You know what? I don't have to share a screen for this part. So he said they said three things that are really crucial for Jewish-Christian relations. So for decades, for centuries, as I'm going to show you, Jews had been shackled with the claim that they were responsible for the death of Jesus, who of course is not only the founder of Christianity, but in Christian terms, they think he was divine, right? So we basically killed God. That's what was the claim. We killed God. You can't get a more evil crime than that. And that, so sometimes it's called the crime of deicide or whatever, but it's a bizarre thing that Jews, centuries after, long after Jesus was dead, continued to be called Christ killers. And this was actually one of my only experiences of anti-Semitism as a child myself. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and it was in the 1960s. Yeah, so it was shortly after Vatican II, let's say. But it took a while for this message to get out. Some kid on a bicycle was riding by our house, and he called me a Christ killer. I had no idea what he was saying because I'd never heard this before. I had to ask my parents. And frankly, I guess it stuck in my head because I still remember it. But since it was a one-off event, I didn't really take it that seriously. But Jews had been called Christ killers for centuries, long after Jesus died. It's a bizarre thing. So the Catholic Church in Vatican II said neither all Jews at the time of Jesus' life nor any Jews after that had anything to do with Jesus' death. That's a dramatic change in theology, right? Because for centuries they'd been saying the opposite. Now they said, no, the Jews had really nothing to do with Jesus. Well, not nothing. There were a few Jews who might have had something to do with his death, but only a few Jews at the time that he was alive, right? And no Jews after that. So you can't blame Jews later for Jesus' death anymore. The second thing was another doctrine which had been, the predominant view in Catholicism for centuries. And this was, so the question was, if Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, right? If he was the Messiah and the Messiah is a Jewish thing, how is it that the Jews don't recognize that he's the Messiah, right? How do we explain that God allows Jews to continue to exist, making the claim that he was not the Messiah, right? God should have put a stop to this. So why are there still Jews living today who don't believe that he was the Messiah? And the answer the church came up with was that the church needed to preserve some remnant of the Jewish people to testify to the authenticity of what they call the Old Testament, because the New Testament is built on the Old Testament. And so the authority of the Old Testament had to be verified. And here you have these Jews who will tell you that the Old Testament is true. So we need them for that purpose. We can't totally destroy them. But because they were wrong, and they clearly are either blinded to the truth, stubbornly blind to the truth, or worse, the devil is blinding them, or even worse, they are somehow in league with the devil, and that's why they don't believe. Um, Therefore, they need to be humiliated and subjugated and treated miserably to show the superiority of the Catholic Church over the Jewish people. Literally, that was part of the deal, and 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 as part of that, they also had this idea that the New Testament, right? Testament basically means covenant or contract. The new contract had replaced the old contract. There was no old contract anymore. So the contract with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses and the Israelites has been revoked. There is no contract like that anymore. There's only one contract with Jesus. And since the Jews reject Jesus, they have no relationship to God. They're cut off from God. And that doctrine has a big name, a big word as a title for it: supersessionism, right? That Christianity has superseded Judaism, or sometimes in other languages called replacement theology. Christianity has replaced Judaism. And so Jews have no relationship with God whatsoever. And that, again, was standard Catholic doctrine for centuries. Now, after Vatican II, they said, nope, that's not true. Jews have an independent relationship with God. God does not revoke God's contracts ever. Therefore, that contract continues. And Jews have an independent, continuing relationship with God, and the church really doesn't have anything to say about it. It's not our business. It's not our area to comment on. That's the Jews' relationship with God, and we're staying out of it. which is really again a 180-degree change in Catholic teaching. And then the third thing that the Catholic Church said in this doctrine, in this statement, by the way, it's sometimes called Nostra Aetate, which means in our time. And the third thing the Catholic Church said was, the Church will no longer tolerate any form of anti-Semitism. Any kind of anti-Semitism is anathema to the Church. If we hear about anything attacking the Jews, we stand with the Jews. Again, just a dramatic change in Catholic teaching. And then there was one positive thing, which I think Heschel was also responsible for, and that was they wanted to have continuing dialogue with Jews for mutual understanding. So that in 1965, Nostra Aetate was promulgated, and that really dramatically changed the nature of half the Christian world is Catholic, just to give you an idea. So that really dramatically changed the relationship between Jews and Christians, at least for Catholics. And shortly after that, many of the Protestant denominations adopted similar doctrines. Not all of them. So you'll still see, so evangelical type Christians and other denominations thinking that we have no contract with God, we have no relationship with God, and the only way to get to God is through Jesus. And so they're still trying to proselytize us. You will still hear some people call us Christ killers or blame us for the death of Jesus. I mean, that still goes on, but it's much less common than it was beforehand. So I want to emphasize this because what I'm going to talk about now is some pretty unfortunate history. And the fact that at least I don't experience that now, I do a lot of interfaith work, and the fact that I don't experience that now, I think, is largely a product of Vatican II and the subsequent thinking of non-Catholic Christian denominations as well. And thank goodness, right? I mean, now we have pretty good relations, which is important. Okay, so now, unfortunately, let's take a look at some of this unfortunate history. So as I said, for the most part, Western anti-Semitism really took off with Christianity. There is an argument that one of these folks in here makes that some pagans weren't too thrilled with Jews either, but we didn't have too much of a problem until Constantine makes Christianity the official religion of Rome and then really they start persecuting Jews. So what are the origins of Christian anti-Semitism? First, that claim of deicide that I mentioned. There's this idea of law versus love, which I understand is one of Paul's ideas, the Apostle Paul. I don't thoroughly understand Paul's idea. Something about it, because there is a law, when I violate it, I know I'm guilty, and therefore the law is a bad thing. We should, I'm not exactly sure how that works. But in any case, the idea is, he said, the Old Testament, the Old Covenant with God, was based on laws. That's pretty clear. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, has a lot of laws, and the New Covenant with Jesus is all about love. And we should all talk about the love and forget about the law. That, there's sort of, he pits the two against each other. Our view is that law and love go hand in hand, because we have a prayer actually that says this right before we recite the Shema in the evening service and in the morning service. There's a prayer called Ahavat Olam or Ahava Rabbah, either a great love or an everlasting love that God has for us. And because of God's love for us, he gave us the law, and that's how we learn how to behave, right? And of course, we're not going to be perfect, but God doesn't expect us to be perfect. But law and love are really two sides of the same coin. Just like when you're a parent, you try to teach your children how to be good, how to be good citizens, good friends, good students, how to be good people, right? So God tried to teach us how to be good by giving us these laws. We see them as part of the same thing, whereas, at least in Pauline Christianity, there seems to be this antithesis of law and love. The Pharisees, of course, are not portrayed very well generally in the New Testament. Most modern Christian scholars will admit that the portrayal of Pharisees as bad in the New Testament is partly because Christianity agreed with Jews that the Pharisees were the precursors to the rabbis, and the rabbis were precursors to the Talmud and so on, and what became Judaism. And so therefore, part of the separation of Christianity from what it became Judaism after Jesus' death was this trying to separate your identity from the Pharisees. And so it's kind of like, if you will, something like sibling rivalry, right? If you, if your brother or sister does something that annoys you, somehow it annoys you a whole lot more because it's your brother or sister. If it was a friend or just a neighbor, you would care a lot less about this annoying behavior. But because it's your brother or sister, it really irritates you. And there was a lot of animosity on both sides between early Christianity and early Judaism about the nature of Jesus, right? Early Christians redefined what Jesus' mission was. He wasn't the Messiah that the Jews thought was going to happen, the George Washington who was going to liberate the Jewish people from the Roman Empire and declare independence and be our king. That's what the Jews were thinking. They reimagined what Jesus' mission was, to be to send this new idea and to suffer and die to atone for the sins of humanity, and that's how they defined Messiah. That was not anything like our idea of a Messiah, but that's how they viewed it. And so you can imagine when 35 years after Jesus' death, the Jews actually do revolt against Rome, and we lose after a 4-year bloody battle, and the temple is destroyed, and the Jerusalem is destroyed, and the thousands and thousands of citizens are killed. And the Christians are saying, it's okay, because Jesus has come, and the Messiah has come, and you can still get heaven if you accept his sacrifice on your behalf. And that's what we mean when we say Messiah. The Messiah has come. And the Jews would look at these early Christians and say, who are you kidding? The Messiah hasn't come. Haven't you noticed things are so much worse now than before Jesus came? Like, it's now even worse. In what way has the Messiah come? We're not only subjects to Rome still, We have no temple. The city's destroyed. We're in a miserable condition here. There's no Messiah. Wake up. Right? So two diametrically opposed views of what Jesus was about lead and sort of trying to base themselves on the same Bible, and it's like sibling rivalry, right? And so there was a lot of angry, hateful things said on both sides, really, in those early decades, and that sort of worked its way into what became the New Testament by describing the Pharisees as the bad guys, at least according to many modern scholars. I mentioned here Travers Herford. He is one of the earliest Christian scholars who started to promote a different view of the Pharisees. So he started in the 1880s. So he's one of the first. He's not exactly Christian. He's a Unitarian. So some Christians don't consider him Christian. But he was a British Unitarian minister, and he studied on his own Jewish texts. He learned the Hebrew alphabet. He started studying it in original. And then he wrote articles and lectures, and he went all around England giving lectures to Christians about how wonderful the Pharisees were. You can imagine how well he was received. But he was one of the earliest people to do that. So anyway, so the idea that Pharisees are bad, and of course, anytime in the New Testament, somehow Jesus' Jewish identity is lost, and his followers are all Jews as well. So all the time when Jesus gets into arguments with the Jews, right, it's the Jews, the other guys. And so that leads to this anti-Semitic idea about who the Jews are, forgetting, of course, that Jesus and his followers were also Jews. So the blood libel actually is a thing in Christianity that starts in the Middle Ages, and it's a bizarre idea. So I'm going to try and describe. Well, what is the idea? The idea this always happened around Easter time, and there would be a Christian baby would be missing, and who knows why. And the Christian community would blame the Jewish community for the loss of this Christian baby, claiming that the Jews stole this baby away from the family, killed the baby, and then used its blood to make matzah for Passover. I mean, this is like the most bizarre, horrific thing I can imagine. And I don't even, I mean, it's very hard to explain how they even came up with such a crazy idea. But this is my theory. I don't know if anybody else has come up with this idea, but my theory is that, remember, Christianity is based on the idea that Jesus' death atones for sins, and that the blood of Jesus in particular, right? They believe that classic Christian belief was you need to have a blood sacrifice. There had to be blood spilled to atone for sin. And so Jesus' blood, his death, atones for sin. Well, so that, and if you believe that in the Christian world, and then you look at the Jews who don't believe that Jesus' blood atones for sin, so they must be thinking to themselves, well, what do the Jews do to get a blood sacrifice to atone for sin? Oh, well, if they must be snatching our babies and sacrificing them to atone for their sins. But of course, in the Jewish world, as I've mentioned before, we think human sacrifices are horrific. One of the reasons why we don't believe Jesus' death atones for anybody's sins, because it's a human death, and why would that atone for anybody's sins? So first of all, that wouldn't work for us. And secondly, needless to say, human beings are not kosher. They're not one of the kosher animals that you can eat. And even if human beings were somehow kosher, we're supposed to drain the blood from the animal and not eat the blood. So, I mean, there's like 50 different reasons why this crazy idea doesn't make any sense in the Jewish world. But if you're Christian and you don't know anything about Jews, I guess it's a possible belief. So, and it was real. And unfortunately, what would happen there's a couple passages in the New Testament where they blame Jews for Jesus' death, right? It's the most classic one is where Pontius Pilate says, "I don't see anything wrong with this man, but if you really want me to kill him, I'll kill him for you," basically. And the Jewish crowd, quote unquote, the Jewish crowd shouts, "Crucify him, crucify him." And then they add this bizarre statement, "May his blood be upon us and on our children." Right? And that's when Pontius Pilate washes his hands. That's where that expression comes from. "I wash my hands of this matter." He literally washes his hands and says, "Okay, we're going to kill him, but it's on your head." And it was based on that passage that Jews, after Jesus' death, for generations afterwards, because they said, "May the sin be upon us and upon our children," right? So our children, our children's children, our children's children's children, for centuries after, all the Jews are always blamed for Jesus' death. A modern interpretation of that, first of all, the gospel was written after the destruction of the temple. And the writer was probably not referring to all Jews everywhere, but to the Jewish leadership, political leadership in Jerusalem, who might, in my opinion, have had something to do with his death. So the writer is trying to explain how God allowed the temple to be destroyed. Because the temple gets destroyed in the next generation, right? It's a generation later that the temple's destroyed. So the writer, post facto, writes into the words of the mouths of the Jews who were living at the time, "We want the sin upon us and on our children. The next generation are going to suffer for this crime." And how are they going to suffer? The temple will be destroyed. Now, of course, I reject the whole idea outright, but that would explain what that passage is supposed to mean in some way that would make some sense. But it would only apply to the next generation. But so I should add, so why do I think it's possible that some Jews may have been involved in his death? Well, I think I explained this to each of you individually when I meet with you before the class. But if Jesus is claiming to be the Messiah, and the classical idea of the Messiah is George Washington, who's going to start a revolution against the oppressor, right, which is Rome, and he comes into Jerusalem right before Passover, the holiday of freedom, and he comes in with his entourage of Jewish followers. Pontius Pilate would not need anybody to tell him to execute this person. He's clearly committing treason from Pilate's point of view. Jesus would be committing treason against the emperor in Rome. And this is precisely why Pilate is there with the Roman soldiers, to prevent the Jews from revolting against the Roman Empire. And so he would clearly put an end to Jesus. He wouldn't need the Jews to tell him to do that. And he would execute him in the way the Romans did at that time, which was gruesome, but also made a political statement. You hang you out on a cross to asphyxiate in a horrible, painful way. And as if to make a statement, don't any of you other Jews try to revolt against Rome, or this will happen to you. But just in case Pilate didn't catch Jesus' grand entrance into Jerusalem, in case he was sleeping or busy or something, it's possible, I certainly would see it as possible, that Caiaphas, who was the high priest, and or some of the other Jewish aristocracy there, might have gone over to warn him about this guy. Because, but here's the point. In the Christian Bible, they make it out to be Pilate is this innocent guy. "I don't see anything wrong with this person. I'm going to wash my hands. It's not my fault." That is, first of all, we know, not Pontius Pilate's personality. He was a ruthless governor. He had already caused several incidents with the Jews in the past because he didn't like us and didn't understand us. And he ended up crucifying dozens of Jews after Jesus. He was not a kind, thoughtful person. He was ruthless. So that's the first problem. And the second thing is that Caiaphas would not need to trick him into killing Jesus. All Caiaphas would have to say is, this guy is trouble, he's threatening Rome. And Pilate would do what he was supposed to do, what he was sent there to do, and execute Jesus. But he wouldn't say, I'm washing my hands, it's not my fault. He would have him executed immediately. So the power, I mean, the difference is that the power was all with Pilate. Pilate had the Roman army behind him. Caiaphas didn't. Caiaphas sat as high priest at the pleasure of Pilate. And if Caiaphas looked at Pilate cross-eyed one day, Pilate would have him executed. So the story was clearly modified. And again, many modern Christian scholars would say that the story was probably modified partly because the early Christian church is trying to not get in trouble with Rome. Right? This is before Constantine takes over the Roman Empire and Christians were being persecuted by Rome. You don't want to cause more trouble with the Romans by claiming that they're the ones who killed God. Right? So you can't blame the Romans, so they wash their hands, but you can blame the Jews, who are, after all, the siblings you're having a rivalry with. Anyway, that's one way to possibly understand that, but that's not how Christians understood it for centuries. They blamed us, and then you had that. So there's all of that. The next thing is Shylock. You may know from The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare. So first of all, you should know that these blood libels that happened, there was a blood libel in England a couple centuries before Shakespeare, where a baby was missing and the Christians blamed the Jews. And as a result of that, the Jews were actually banished from England. So that by the time William Shakespeare is born, there hadn't been Jews in England for a couple hundred years. Shakespeare may never have met an actual Jew before. So he bases this character Shylock on, what common Christian understanding of Jews were without having ever met one. And there's a whole debate in English literary circles as to whether Shakespeare was really portraying Shylock as an evil person, or because of this long speech he gives. Hopefully you all are aware of the story. Does everybody know the story? The story is there's a merchant of Venice who needs a loan. Shylock is the Jewish moneylender, and the merchant doesn't have any collateral to put up for the loan. So Shylock says, well, how about a pound of your flesh? I get to cut out a pound of your flesh if you can't repay the loan. And the merchant believes he has this big shipment coming in. It's going to be easy to pay back. So he agrees. The shipment is lost at sea, and Shylock comes to collect his pound of flesh. Right. And then he goes to court, and they end up arguing that he was basically trying to murder this guy. And so they convict Shylock, and all kinds of horrible things happen. But in the last soliloquy, the last speech of Shylock, he says, basically, if you prick me, do I not bleed? Right? I'm a human being like all of you. I'm entitled to rights just like you. Why do you vilify me? Sort of. And based on that soliloquy, there's an argument made in some British literary circles that maybe Shakespeare was trying to put a human face on the Jews, even though this kind of horrible plot. Well, how did this comes from this basic idea that Jews are greedy and penurious, and they lend money at high interest rates, and they're unfair. That whole aspect of understanding Jews came about because of economic situation in most of the Middle Ages. Most people earned a living in trades, right? So the trades are a guild. So you were a tanner, you did leatherworks. You were a potter, you made pottery. You were an iron worker, you made things made out of metal, and that's how you made a living. But these trades had trade unions, guilds called guilds, and in order to be able to set up shop to be one of these things, you had to be a member of the guild. And in Europe, the Christian guilds excluded Jews. So Jews could not be tanners or potters or ironsmiths. They were prohibited from doing all those things. But there were a couple of things that they allowed the Jews to do. Number one, loan money. And as we know, any economy needs loans, right? One of the reasons that the 2009 economy fell apart was because the banks stopped making loans. And it took a long time to unfix that, to free up the money again so that loans could be made again. And that's why we suffered for a while in that recession. You need loans for any economy to run. But Christians and Jews had the same rule. You can't lend money on interest because that's what the Bible says. And nobody wants to lend money unless there's something in it for them. So Christians couldn't lend money to other Christians. Jews couldn't lend money to other Jews, except, without interest. But what Christians could do is ask Jews to make loans. And so the Jewish people became money lenders. They would lend money because you could charge interest from non-Jews. And then, of course, the question was, were you charging too much interest or were you too greedy? Nobody likes to pay back the loan at the end, whatever the terms were. So that put Jews in a bad light. The other profession Jews could do was tax collecting. Nobody likes to pay taxes. So what better profession to give to the Jews, who nobody likes anyway, right? Let's have them be the tax collectors. They already hate the Jews. They can hate them for something else besides. So money lending and tax collecting were two things Jews did. A third thing that Jews did was international trade. And the reason they did international trade was because there were Jews living all over the world. And if you were a businessman and you wanted to have international trade agreements, one of the problems is which law applies to your agreement. If you're a Frenchman doing business with a Spanish person, does Spanish law apply or French law apply? And maybe if the case is brought in a Spanish court and you're the French person, you're going to be what they call hometowned, right? The Spanish court will look more favorably on their citizen than you, and you'll get screwed. So it was a little bit of a dicey business doing international trade. But Jews were living all over the place. And we spoke a common language, and we had a common legal system, the Jewish legal system. And we could go to a Jewish court, which would be fair to both parties, to just handle the disputes. And we had connections in all these different countries. So international trade became something Jews could do because we lived all over and we could trust each other to do business. So those were the things that were being done. But anyway, this idea that Jews are greedy and penurious comes from this unfortunate situation where one of the only things we could do was lend money. I mentioned before the necessity of the Jewish remnant to testify to the truth of the Old Testament, but they should be subjugated to the church. Let me talk about, I want to show you this picture. I didn't know anything about this until after I was a rabbi and somebody pointed this out to me. So many churches in the Middle Ages, cathedrals, including the cathedral in Strasbourg, and this is the Strasbourg Cathedral, had over the main doorway a statue of the church, that's the one on the right, and the synagogue, right? Ecclesia Synagogo. And ecclesia is the church, and synagogo is the synagogue. And you can see right away the difference between these two women. Right, the church is very regal with the crown on her head, standing in a proud stance with the chalice in her hand and the cross as her staff, right? Kind of very self-assured and confident. And this is the synagogue. You can't maybe tell from the picture, but she's blindfolded. Her head is bowed over, her staff is broken, and the law is slipping from her hands. Right, so right in the church, as people would enter the church every Sunday, was this depiction of the proud, triumphant church over the subjugated, sort of disheveled Jew, right? And this was a very popular iconography of churches in the Middle Ages. Interestingly, it's based, I learned later, on the story of Rachel and Leah, right? Jacob loves the younger daughter, Rachel, who's beautiful, and he ends up marrying Leah, who has weak eyes, right? And Leah is the older one. And so these two women are sort of not only church and synagogue, but they represent Rachel and Leah. The synagogue is the older one, so it's Leah, weak eyes, she's blindfolded, right? She's not the preferred wife. The preferred wife is the beautiful Rachel, which is represented by the church. And that was, again, from an early Christian interpretation of Genesis. Any case, so that's just an example of that. Yeah, it's kind of, oh, you know what? So since I showed you that, let me show you what the modern version is. I mean, I want to tell you, this is not, I'm giving you the sad history, but I want to tell you that it's not so much like that anymore. So there's a new one commissioned, I believe, for the Catholic Church. So here's a new church and synagogue, and the two are sitting together. They're facing each other. The synagogue has the scrolls in her hand. The church has her Bible in her hand. They're both equal. They both have crowns on their heads, right? And they're in dialogue with each other, right? So again, so a lot of times pictures are worth 1,000 words, and how we portray ourselves pictorially can influence how we think about each other, right? So this was a new one that was commissioned since Vatican II. Okay, anyway, let's get back to, okay, so what else do you have? Disputations. Yeah, so another sorry thing, boy, I'm going to run out of time here. Another sorry thing that happened in the Middle Ages was occasionally the church would take it upon itself to organize a formal disputation or debate between a champion of Christianity and a champion of Judaism. And the most famous one is the one by the rabbi who we call Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, or sometimes Nachmanides, who debated against a priest whose name was Pablo Cristiani. So Pablo Cristianity was his assumed name that he took when he became a priest. He was a Jew who converted to Christianity. And so he took a classic name for a Jew who converts to Christianity, right? Paul was the Pharisee who converted to Christianity, and Paul is Pablo. And of course, Cristiani is his last name. So Pablo Cristiani. So he debated Ramban. Typically in these disputations, the Jew had at least one hand tied behind his back because he couldn't say anything blasphemous against Christianity. So it's very hard to explain why Jews reject Christianity without saying something that Christians would consider blasphemous. But anyway, he debated, and apparently by all rights he won. The king of Aragon, I think, who set up the dispute, agreed that Ramban won. The normal rule was if the Jew lost, the Jews had to either be slaughtered or leave town. They had to leave the country. Or if they won, they could maybe continue to live there, but pay an extra tax or something. It's kind of a bizarre situation. I think one of the rules was that Ramban was not supposed to publish his arguments afterwards, and somehow somebody did publish his arguments. And so because that violated the rule, he had to flee for his life. Anyway, there's that. Ghettos. The original ghetto was in Venice. Where we think about the ghettos here, unfortunately, which were basically racist ghettos. But the first ghetto was in Venice, and it comes from the Italian word ghetto. So in Venice, the site of the old iron foundry, they moved the site of the foundry subsequently, but where the foundry used to be was this area, and the word for foundry in Italian is ghetto. And so what they decided was they didn't want the Jews living among the Christians in the city of Venice. So they walled up the area around the ghetto, and they said the Jews have to live inside the walls. They can come out of the ghetto to work during the day, but by a certain time of curfew, they had to be back inside the ghetto. And that's because Christians didn't want to live with Jews. And that kind of became popular in many other European cities afterwards. And they all became known as ghettos. And of course, all of this ends up with the Holocaust, which, as I point out here, is not Christian, but it was aided by centuries of anti-Semitism. The last thing I want to talk about is two things, I guess. I'm going to have to leave. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was not Christian at all. This was Tsarist Russia. So you may or may not know that Jews tend to be at the forefront of a lot of different movements on both sides. Right? There's capitalist Jews and there's also socialist Jews. And some of the leaders of the early socialist movement were Jews. So Tsarist Russia created this forgery claim that these international cabal of Jews were trying to take over the world with this new idea. And the Protocols of the Elders of Zion were supposedly the minutes taken at this meeting of international Jews, plotting the destruction of the world or conquest of the world by the Jewish cabal. Everybody knows it's a forgery now. I mean, it's been well established by scholars that the Tsarist Russia perpetrated this in order to attack the Jews. Nevertheless, this idea that the Jews are trying to take over the world is still a very popular trope in many parts of the world. And the Protocols of the Elders of Zion has been translated into many different languages and is still somewhat of a popular book around the world. And then, unfortunately, with the rise of Zionism and the Jewish return to Israel, which we'll talk about in another class, there was a reaction in, originally it was, the relationship was fairly cordial, but eventually the Muslims became very anti-Semitic, and they may have been influenced, actually, oddly enough, by early Christian missionaries who came and told them all the horrible things that they believed about the Jews. And they kind of adopted some of them so that 20, 30 years ago, I guess 20 years ago, there were two so-called documentaries, one in Syria and one in Egypt, part of which involved the blood libel and Jews trying to take over the world, kind of a mishmash of things. That was not part of Islam until the 20th century, but kind of got adopted by some segments of that world. And again, that's starting to change now too. We have much better relations, of course, with Muslims here in this country, and Israel is starting to develop relationship with other Muslim countries. The issue with the Palestinians still needs to be resolved, but we'll talk about that another time. Holocaust denial is part of the recent thing. There's some pseudo scholars who trying to argue that 6 million Jews really didn't die and Auschwitz wasn't really a gas chamber and all kinds of other nonsense, despite the overwhelming, indisputable evidence to the contrary. Deborah Lipstadt is a Jewish historian who fought a famous British pseudo-historian in British courts and won. A nice movie was made out of it, which is good to watch. It's called Denial. Okay, well, that's about all I have time for. So now you've had the class about, yes, there are people who hate us. And although the picture has changed, fortunately, in many ways, and the world is, because of Vatican II and other things, the world is different now. Yeah, Israel and the Middle East, I'll talk about that next time, I guess, when I talk about Israel. But I think the best antidote to anti-Semitism is education. And that's one of the reasons why I do interfaith work, is so that people can see who real Jews are, ask us questions so they can get real Jewish answers. And also for Jews to hear from Christians, that the overwhelming majority of Christians, I think, today are not anti-Semitic, and they want to see all of us as human beings and find a way to work together. And I do that with Muslims and Hindus and others as well. So, but it's important to know that there are still people out there who don't like us, and incidents of anti-Semitism in the last couple of years have risen even in this country. we had the famous, unfortunate, infamous thing in Charlottesville just a few years ago. We had these Nazis marching through the streets saying Jews will not replace us, which was a typical Nazi cry. So there are still anti-Semites out there. But again, the best way to handle that, in my opinion, is reach out to people who, first of all, are people of goodwill and who want to stop hatred of all kinds, and secondly, to educate those people who are educable, that the Jews are not bad people. Any questions? Okay, so now you've heard the required class about anti-Semitism. I'm going to leave the class to Diane. I need to give her the hosting ability here, and then I'm going to leave.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Where's Diane?
Thanks, Rabbi Morgen.
You are welcome.
Rabbi Morgen.
Thank you.
Thank
Where's,
you.
okay, I know what I can do. I can put Diane at the top here. There she is. Oh, she is a co-host. Okay, she already is. All right.
All right, you have to zip off to Beth now.
Yeah, I have to go to another place. All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.
I am at Steve's desk at Beth Yeshurun. So it seems like a really, really long time since we all met. My goodness. So we're in our last final post-Pesach drive. Let's go to, let's just review. I think it was the chapter for Pesach that we kind of rushed through. So I just want to quickly go back to that, even though that was a long time ago. Let's see. Okay. So can we all just very quickly take a look at chapter 17, page 62. And on page 62, we're introduced to Pei and Samech. I'm sure we already did this, but it's been a while, so I just want to review. So Pei kind of looks like a bet, kind of looks like a cuff. I think of Pei as being like a cuff with an elephant nose. That's what it looks like to me. And as a memory device, you can say to yourself, Pei has a pebble, right? Anyway, when we read Pei, it's the P sound. And the other letter that we learned in chapter 17 was Samech. And Samech is basically round, often with a flat top, and looks a lot like a mem sophit. But if you see something that looks like a mem sophit and it's in the middle of a word, you can be sure that it's not a mem sophit, it must be a samech. Samech is much less common than mem sophit, so if you're ever in doubt at the end of a word as to whether something is samech or mem sophit, if the print isn't clear, your best bet is to guess mem and not samech. Okay, so we have two letters that sound like the English letter S. What are those two letters?
Samech and Sin.
Yes, todah, samech and sin. Okay, let's take a look at page 64. We're just going to read the last 3 lines on page 64. I'll read them and then you can echo me, okay? Because I want to go quickly. So we'll start on line 6. Misaperet, Knesset, Nispa, Hachnasat, Maspik. Okay, are people echoing me? I can't tell because everybody's muted. Let's do it one more time, line 6. Misaperet,
Misaperet.
Knesset,
Knesset.
Nispach,
Nispach.
Hachnasat,
Haknasat.
Maspik.
Maspik.
Tov ma'od. Okay, line 7. Chasadim,
Chasadim.
Chasidim,
Hasidim.
Parnasa,
Parnasa.
Selicha,
Selicha.
Selichot,
Selichot.
Pesach,
Pesach.
Karpas,
Karpas.
Charoset,
Charoset.
Matzah,
Matzah.
Maror,
Maror.
Pesach,
Pesach.
Metsuyan. Okay, page 65. All right. Once again, let's just do lines 3 and 4. Lines 3 and 4, and we'll do it exactly the same way. Sapir,
Sapir,
Harim,
Harim,
Sahar,
Sahar,
Hashamayim,
Hashamayim,
Yechsar,
Yechsar,
Star.
Sodot,
Sodot.
Yiram,
Jiram.
Kiso,
Kiso.
Lahem,
Lahem,
Rishaim.
Reshaim.
Good. Okay. And I think we might have done this already. So on line, in the middle of the page, we have some foods that are pretty much the same in Hebrew and English. So I'm just asking, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but would anybody like to try to read line 1?
I can do it.
Oh, super. Go ahead.
All right. So the first one, that is banana.
Right. Banana. Good.
Then this one is popcorn.
Good.
And this one is pizza.
Good. Pizza. Yeah.
Then it is cola.
Good.
And then we have pita.
Right. I wonder linguistically whether the word pizza and pita aren't related historically. So, because the words are so close and they describe very similar kinds of breads. Okay. Excellent job. Would anybody like to volunteer to try line 2? No?
Seder. I can try.
Good.
And number 2, the line number 2 is Seder.
Right. Cider.
Cider. Chocolate. Chocolate.
Right. Chocolate.
Avocado. Avocado.
My favorite.
Me too. Guacamole. Okay. Soda. Broccoli.
Good. Woo.
Broccoli.
Okay, good. So when you go to the shuk in Machane Yehuda in Jerusalem and you need to buy some vegetables, you know what to ask for. Okay. Line 3, would anybody like to try?
I'll go.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay, that is kiwi.
Right.
That is nectarine. Nectarina. So nectar.
Right. Right.
That is artichoke.
Good.
Limon.
Right.
So limon, would that be lemon or lime?
Lemon.
Lemon. Because I know in Spanish sometimes it's, I think it's different. Like
Yeah, ves, it hurts.
I'm really not
It
sure.
hurts.
To tell you the truth.
Ok, ¿te vas a bañar o qué? Bueno, déjame hablarle a tu tía a ver qué van a hacer.
Somebody needs to mute. Somebody needs to mute. Okay. So limon, and right, and lemonade is limonada.
yeah. Paprika.
Good. Paprika. Good. Excellent. Okay, and although the exercise at the bottom of 65 is excellent, I will leave that to you to practice. And I think we might have also done chapter 18, but let's take a quick look at it. Here we have shofar. And I can honestly say that probably until the last 20, 25 years, it was, boy, extremely rare. I can't ever remember having women blowing the shofar before the last 20 years or so. But it's so nice now to have women blowing the shofar. What a nice mitzvah. Okay. All right. So we're looking at the letter Fe, which looks exactly like the letter Pei, except it's missing the pebble, right? We say Pei as a pebble, and Fe doesn't have a pebble. Okay, so Fe is like F, and let's look at line 3 at the bottom, and I'll read the words and you can echo me. Yofi.
Yofi.
Which is kind of like, it's really old expression now, but yofi, which really means beautiful, often has this kind of connotation. Yofi, like that. Yes, super, great, yofi. Okay, nafshi.
Nafshi.
Yafa,
Yafa.
which is really the same root as yofi, means beautiful. Faro.
Faro.
Pharaoh is the same as paro. And who is the paro?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Yeah, with my Philadelphia accent. Pharaoh. Nifla.
Rikla.
Good. Line 4. Lefanav.
Lefanav.
Hafachta.
Hafachta.
Ofarim.
Ofarim.
Now, I'm not sure that we've had this vowel yet, but when you have a shva in front of a kamatz, it changes the pronunciation from a to o. Ofarim.
Okay, Ofarim. I saw that and I was just like, oh, why is that an O sound?
I think that although they don't list it in the vowels up on top, that we did have a little paragraph about it embedded in one of the chapters.
Yes.
Now, sure, we did, right?
Yeah, page 61.
Oh, you remember. Kola kavod to you. I'm just going to take a really quick look back at 61. Yes, it's so important. They shouldn't bury it. Okay. All right. And then online, so everybody take a look at 61, maybe after the lesson, and give yourself a little refresher on this vowel. So, but anyway, when you have a kamatz with a shabbat in front of it, it's O. Now, when you have a regular kamatz in front of this chataf kamatz, it's the regular kamatz catches the pronunciation. So in the third one, it's not fa'oli, it's fo'oli, fo'oli. For some reason, the first vowel picks up the pronunciation from the vowel after it. But it's confusing because it doesn't work the other way around. Like it's not o-o-reem, it's o-fa-reem. But here, second to the end on line 4, it's fo-o-li, where the first vowel catches it from the second. I can tell you in Israel that there are lots of people, educated people who maybe aren't very interested in grammar, who don't worry about any of these grammar points that we're learning. Okay, and then the last word is fesel. Fesel. Okay. All right, here we go. Page 67. What does it say at the bottom? Can you find these Hebrew words above? Did we already do this?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just review that. Tefillah means prayer, and it can mean singularly or collectively. Tefillah, prayer. Like someone might ask you, what time is tefillah tomorrow morning? Oh, it's at 8 o'clock. Tefillah is sometimes refers to the whole prayer service. Haftarah. Haftarah, we said, is the section in the Shabbat morning service where we sing a selection from the prophets. And Sfarim, books. Okay. Let's do this on page 68 at the bottom of the page, where we differentiate between ayin and sadi. And on line 1, I'm not even going to read the words, because what I'd like us to do is just first go through and just say the names of the consonants. Okay, so here we go. Line 1, bottom of 68. Ayin sadi, sadi, sadi. Ayin sadi.
Sadi, ayin.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to do that without this time, just line 1, and you could do it with your speaker on or off, either way, but I'll give you about 10 seconds to do it. Line 1.
Ayin, sadi, sadi, sadi.
No, oh no, I'm wrong. Wait, ayin zadi, 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 ayin zadi, zadi, ayin.
Kol hakavod. Okay, so I'm going to read it and you can read it after me. I'll read all 4 and then you can read all 4 after me. Atsi, so sa, itsa, so o.
Adi,
So,
sa,
isa, so, oh.
Good. Okay, line 2. Let's do the same thing. I'll do it and then you do it. Sadi, ayin, ayin, sadi, 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 ayin, sadi.
Sadi, ayin, ayin, sadi, 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 ayin, sadi.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny, even though it's not hard, your brain sometimes pushes you to do it wrong. Okay, here we go. And now I'm going to read it, and then you'll read it after me. Sa'i, otsi, so, atsai.
Sa'i, otzi, so, sai.
Right. So if there's an ah with a yod after it's I. Okay, line 3, same thing. Sadi, ayin, sadi, ayin, none. I guess I should do all the consonants, huh? But it's basically sign, ayin, sadi, ayin, right? Okay, I'm going to read it and then I'm going to ask you to read it. Seva, ayi, sevo, ini.
Seva, ayi,
Ze,
o, ini.
Very good. Now, for the third little word there, why is it sevo and not se-o? Why is it sevo? What's the simplest explanation?
Oh, I'm sorry. There was a rule. Oh, on page 55. There's a
Oh,
rule.
you're going to remember where the rules are. That's awesome. I should make a little table of contents for the rules.
I forgot about. Oh. So I said it wrong.
If there is a vowel, I'm going to read this. If there is a vowel under the letter before an O, then the O has the sound vo. So that's the simplest way of putting it. So sadi O, that sadi has a shva under it. And shva at the beginning of a word has a sound, right? It's se. So, but in fact, even if it was silent, sadi has a vowel. If a consonant has a vowel and then is followed by an O, then the O is pronounced vo. So we know that this is sevo, sevo. And forcing you to practice this a lot, even though it doesn't happen very often. But some of the words that it happens on are very important in the prayer book, like mitzvah, right? That one happens, or mitzvotav, for example, mitzvotav, that happens. Or the word for sin, avono, right? Avono. Those are two times where the O is both a consonant and a vowel. So that's why they're really, really working on this point. Line 4. I'll read it and then you read it. Si no, si yo, Sophie. Can you read it?
Si no, si yo, Sophie.
Good. And then our last. So, o, ne, o, ta. So, go ahead.
So, oh,
Ande,
oh,
Very nice. Good. Okay. So now let's look at Eitz Chaim, page 69. Did we do this one? This also looks familiar to me. I don't know. All right. So one of the biggies is that we're getting the tzadi sofit, right? The final tzadi. And the final tzadi looks like a big Y, doesn't it? That appears like at the end of a word. And truthfully, in some ways, it looks a lot more like an ayin than a regular tzadi. But if you just remember that it looks like a great big Y at the end of a word, I don't think it will be hard for you to identify the tzadi sofits. So we're looking at tzadi, and then we're looking at sere and sere male, right? One is sere, the two horizontal dots, and the two horizontal dots with a yud. Now, some people pronounce the two dots And some people pronounce it A. So some are A and some are A. And you can choose which way. I veer because of my education when I was young, veer towards pronouncing it A. Probably in modern Hebrew, as opposed to prayer book Hebrew, it's more like an eh than an A, but they will understand you and accept your pronunciation in either case, in Israel or in the synagogue.
Cantor, in the Siddur, it's a lot of the prayers, so it would be pronounced, the word that I keep seeing is Bain.
Beini, right, like Beini uvein b'nei Israel. Bain, yeah.
Bain. Okay, so okay, that's okay. I looked at it, I was like, A.
Yeah, but still you might hear somebody saying Ben. Don't let that throw you. Okay, so let's read lines 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 together, and you can just echo me, okay? Oh, and I should say the yud is said to elongate the vowel, but I haven't really experienced that it makes much of a difference. Okay, line 1. Shay, hey, may, lay, day, nay. Okay, this time if you would echo me. Shay,
Shay, hey,
may,
May,
lay,
lay,
day,
day,
nay.
nay,
Good. Next line. Fay,
fay,
say,
say,
tay, yay,
yay,
a,
and
hey. Line 3. Ko, ko, hey,
Kohei,
Kobe,
oh, may,
Obey,
hey, tay,
hey, hey,
dire.
dire,
Line 4. Sefer,
Sefer,
Kohen,
Kohen,
Omer,
Omer,
Hetev,
Day,
Bene,
Benay,
Shane,
Shanay,
Bitzeit, Kayehem.
Hayehem.
Good. Okay. Okay, on page 70, let's go to the reading practice for the Sadi Sofi, the final Sadi. And we'll just do it the same way. You can echo me. Eights,
Eights,
Kates,
cakes,
Hates,
cakes,
Rats,
rat,
Ats.
rat,
I'm not hearing tss. You need a little bit, it's like TSSSS. So you need a little bit more sibilant, as they say, at the end, a little more airs coming out. Let's do line 2. Eights.
eights,
Good. Eight seam.
seam,
Rats.
rats,
Ratsa.
ratsa,
Lates.
lakes,
Late sun.
late sun,
And line 3. Cain.
cane,
Cain.
cane,
Say.
I say,
Dean.
dean,
Ain.
ain,
Kites.
kites.
Okay, let's see. Can we do this or not? Describe a time when someone told you leak pots or low leak pots. Which did you want to do? Leak pots or low leak pots? Okay, leak pots is jump. Leak pots, jump. Low leak pots, don't jump. Okay, so I guess this is directed at kids who struggle with authority, huh? Someone tells them to jump. Leak pots, low leak pots. Jump, don't jump. Okay, if you were here and I could see all of you, I would definitely tell you leak pots. I would really enjoy seeing that. Okay. So can you find on page 71 the expression Eitz Chaim, which means tree of life. Eitz Chaim.
Number 6.
Right in line 6. And then also in line 6 are the last 3 words of the Hamotzi blessing, or the last phrase of the Hamotzi blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamotzi lechem Can people find that phrase? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Okay.
We finally memorized the 3 prayers. I think
Of
this
Shabbat.
week.
Yeah.
We were able to say Hamotzi like without looking or listening to Bim Bam.
Oh, that's fantastic. And also Borei Pri Hagafen.
Yes.
And what was the 3rd prayer?
Oh, the first one, the lights.
Oh, the candles. Oh, but wonderful. So you have candles, Borei Pri Hagafen, and Hamotzi.
Yes.
An accomplishment. Kol hakavod to you. Mazel tov. Okay. Let's take a look just for a minute on the top of 72 at our final forms, right? We have nun, nun sofit, sadi, sadi sofit, mem, and mem sofit. So rather than reading all of these sentences, I'd like you to take a minute to underline or circle all of the sofit letters that you can find on lines 1 through 6. Obviously, being that they're sofit or final forms, they will be at the ends of words, right?
There's a lot more mem sophites than all the others.
Yes, and you know why that is? That's because the ending im is like putting an S at the end of a word in English. It makes it plural.
Ah.
So, plurals, that's very common.
Oh, even looking at the bottom, it's like scissors. It ends in im.
Right. Right. Im and ot are plural endings.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Hebrew grammar is actually a lot of fun. We've barely even looked at Hebrew grammar, but it's loads of fun. If you're like me and just slightly nerdy. I really like grammar. Okay. So line 1, what are the sofit letters that we find in line 1?
Mem and zadi.
Right, mem sofit and sadi sofit. On line 2, what sofit letters do we find?
Nun sophit.
Right, just nun sofit. On line 3, what sofit letters do we have?
Mem Sophie and Mem Sophie.
Tov Me'od. Line 4, what Sofit letters do we have?
Mem Sophie and Tari Sophie.
Good. Line 5.
Mem Sophie and Tari Sophie.
Good. And line 6.
Mem Sophie and Zari Sophie and Mem Sophie.
Right, we have 2 mems. Okay. All right, and let's take a look at some of the words here. And since you can't circle them according to your classroom, you could actually do this. You could stand up and touch each item as you say its name. So, sefer. Can you say sefer?
Sefer.
Sefer is a book. So if you have a book in reach, touch your book and say sefer.
Sefer.
Good. Okay. Kisei.
Kisei.
So if you have a chair nearby, touch the chair and say kisei. Okay. Kier. Wall. Kier. If you have a kier nearby, you can touch your kier and say kier.
Cantor, there's no vowel there. So so we would just assume that there's like an ah sound.
You don't see a vowel under the kuf?
Oh, I see that one, but it's kier. So it goes right from Y to R. Kier?
Yeah, kier. You bring up an interesting point, because really both in English and in Hebrew, there is a vowel element to resh, right? It's not like something where you put your lips together or you put your teeth together to make the consonant sound, right? The resh kind of has a vowel quality to it, just like the yud, right? Yud. It's a combination of tongue and vowel to say yud, right? Yud is mostly E with a little at the end. So you're hearing that sort of unusual quality of the resh here.
Okay.
So that's, you have a good ear to notice that. Okay, delet, door, delet. Okay, some of my students over the years have put little labels on parts of their house so that every time they come to the door, they see the word delet. And when they sit in their chair, they have a little tag on the chair that says kisei, and it helps them to remind themselves what these different places are. Ritzpa.
Ritzpa.
Good, ritzpa. Ritzpa. So that is a floor, is a ritzpa. Iparon.
Iparon.
Okay. Misparayim.
Misparayim.
Eight. Machberet.
Machberet.
Machshev.
Machshev.
Machak.
Machak.
Okay, good. All right. Let's see, we have about 8 minutes. Let's keep going. All right. On page 20 is Yisrael, which is good since we have holidays like Yom Ha'atzmaut coming up, right? So here's Yisrael. So what is the letter being introduced for Yisrael? Do you see it?
Sin.
Sin, right. So that's our other S sound. And I always say that sin is not used that commonly. So if you're reading and you get mixed up, disoriented, and you're not sure, is this a sin or is this a shin? You should guess shin. Okay? So, but here we have sin, and I'm trying to remember, there is some kind of clever way of remembering the dot on the left, but I just can't remember the mnemonic for it. I'm really sorry. If anybody comes up with one, please share it.
Oh, the left-handed
Yeah,
is sinful.
being left-handed is considered sinful. So when the dot was on the left, it was sin.
Right. Or you could say being a lefty isn't sinful, right? Okay. Here we go. Let's go to the bottom of page 73. Sa, si, say, so, se, say. You want to try reading that? Sa,
See, say, so,
se, say.
I messed up that last.
That's okay. I'm going to read 2 and then you can do it after me. Shay, say, she, see, so, show.
He, say, she, see,
Show.
Good. It's interesting how much the book tries to mess you up, but you can transcend all that. Okay, line 3. Niece, just echo me. I'll say them and you can say them after me. Nismach,
nismach,
Asev,
asev,
Samtem,
samten,
Pores.
Greece,
Good. And line 4. Sefatai,
sefatami,
Veit Nase,
ve'it, nase,
Yaase,
ya'ase,
Yismach.
yismach.
Good. Okay. On page 74, let's see. Find and circle the Hebrew for these numbers above. So there's Shemona Esrei. Shemona is 8. Esrei is 10. So Shemona Esrei is 18. Eser, 10. And Sheva, 7. Okay. All right. And then Eretz Yisrael. So why don't I give you a few minutes to try to find those numbers and the word Eretz Yisrael. How are people doing? Almost there?
Found 1. I found 2.
Good.
No. Adam. 7.
I can't find 7 either. That's what I was
Oh,
looking
you
for.
found. Okay.
Come on, 7 is there.
No, you hear me.
I was hidden.
Does somebody know how many more weeks of class we have?
Rabbi Morgan said May 16 is our last day.
Okay, that gives us time because we have 5 more chapters. I think that we certainly can do it in that amount of time.
2, 3, 4. I can't believe we're that far into the year already.
You just flew by.
Wow.
I know, it's just the flow of time has been very strange this year.
Last year seemed like it took forever, and this year is just flying by already.
Yes. Okay. Did anybody find Sheva?
Line 5.
I'm sorry, line what?
5.
Right on line 5 in the middle. Right, there's Sheva. 7, Sheva. Okay. And now, did anybody find Eser?
Next to it.
Right next to it. So it's easy for us. Eser, which is 10. And when I was a young woman, there was this movie called 10, which was supposed to be a comedy. It was very sexist. A perfect woman was a 10. And then the expression became very, very popular. Whenever you were describing somebody who was really awesome, you'd say, oh, she's a 10 or he's a 10. And they started doing it in Israel too, because when I was studying in Israel, they were doing that, Eser for somebody who was really awesome. But it just means 10. Okay. And then Shmona Esrei, which refers to the weekday Amidah, because it has 18 blessings. Where is Shmona Esrei? What line is Shmona Esrei?
Line 6 underneath Eser. Or no.
Yes. Well, it is. It is. Shmona Esrei. It's the 3rd and 4th word on 6. And in Hebrew, like in a lot of languages, the teen numbers are really something in front of a form of the word 10, right? Just like in English, we say 13, and by 13, we mean 3 plus 10, 13. So Shmona Esrei is 8 plus 10, 18. Shmona Esrei. Okay, now let's look on either side of Shmona Esrei, because to the right of Shmona Esrei is Simchat Torah. And what is Simchat Torah?
Joy of Torah.
Joy of Torah. And it's a holiday. When does that holiday take place? Approximately.
Sukkot.
Right, it's the end of Sukkot. Kol hakavod. Very good. So it's in the fall. And then on the other side, we have another important Jewish phrase, Aseret HaDibrot. Does anybody know how to refer to Aseret HaDibrot in English? I will tell you, Aseret has the same root as Eser.
Prayer. Amidah.
I'm just asking people to guess, so it's not fair on my part, but Eser is like 10. So what do you think it is? 10?
10 prayer.
10 commandments. In Hebrew, we don't actually say the 10 commandments. We say the 10 statements. So Dibrot is like statements, the 10 statements.
Decalogues.
Yeah, decalogue, right. Okay. On the next line, oops, you know what? I have to run because I have to go across the building for the next class. So I guess this is not a terrible place to stop. And I'm going to put a here, postmark it, sticky in here. Okay, so we're just about up to 21. We'll try to do 21 and 22 next week. All right, Toda Rabbi, and thank you for your hard work. Appreciate it. Take care.
Have a wonderful week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.